On this late autumn, quite cold, Sarum evening, Stefan awakes um, very well rested. This is the first truly peaceful day's sleep that he's gotten in a week. All that he's been wrestling with in his thoughts, the thought of being exiled forever, the thought of potentially not existing anymore, his worries and concerns about whether the entity in the grove outside of Fletcher is who he thinks it is. It's all too confusing. The message that he needs to deliver. But when will he see another Malkavian in the city? Well, when will he see other Malkavians in the city in a group, in mass? As those words cross his mind, he thinks for a moment. The irony. As is usual, it doesn't take him long to get himself ready for the evening. But upon waking, he feels a hunger like he hasn't felt before. The claws of the beast, like an animal at the screen door, barely kept back by his self-control. He begins to worry. How could he wasn't hungry yesterday, he wasn't hungry the day before. He tries to remember when last he fed, and he realizes that it's been about 2 weeks. Panicked, Stefan finishes dressing, runs out the door. Forgetting to lock it. He just runs out, and he's single-minded in what he needs to do. Completely conscious, but single-minded. Absolutely focused. Trying to think of all of the good that exists around him. Trying not to become focused. Stagnant, weighed down. He heads out of his apartment towards projects. It's closer. It's not something. If it wasn't for the imminent need, he would never feed there. Something about it. He doesn't know what, but there's just something about feeding in the area. Some sense of wrong there. He's never been able to really explain it, other than the gunshots and the obvious signs that once marked taught him how to avoid. He heads north the fastest route possible. Um, while making his way, he begins listening intently. With his eyes forward, he listens intently to his footsteps to keep them softer, less noticeable, uh, definitely less noticeable than the ambient noise around in the city as he makes his way through Chinatown. And to some observers, they would think a cat, a dog, somebody turning the corner. Not sure what it is. Stefan slips into the shadows, continuing north towards the projects. It doesn't take too much longer before he enters the edge of the area. He doesn't enter down uh, a primary main street that runs from the projects south between the areas of Little Italy and Chinatown. No, 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 no. That main street. He remembers suddenly the activity, the dangers down that street. Certainly for one walking. He avoids it. He sticks to the eastern part of the projects. Heading in, he begins his hunt. And this, kiddies, is where I remind you to always remember your character sheet. Don't pull a me. Um, he begins scanning the streets for people. No sooner does he enter, um, does he notice a man walking. Um, at first glimpse, it just appears to be wearing average daily clothes, um, carrying something, a backpack slung over one shoulder, perhaps. Who could say in the darkness? Stefan continues behind him, measuring his footsteps, trying to keep each footfall as soft and silent as possible. I'll make another stealth roll. Dex and stealth. As he's walking up a little bit closer, the man turns. Calls out, "Hey, what are you doing back there? Hey, what's up, man? What are you doing?" Stefan, realizing he's been spotted, what can he do? Begins walking out. or, continue or begins or continues to walk down the street a bit. I was heading home. Nothing more. Um, Man looks at Stefan. Looks at how well dressed he is. Yeah, right. You're heading home dressed like that in this area? Bullshit. What you up to? You a cop? I am not. I'm not an officer of the law. Man kind of takes. It doesn't take any steps back. He just kind of uh, takes a step to the side a little bit as Stefan gets closer and closer. He doesn't appear intimidated at all. You know, like he's standing his ground almost. As Stefan gets closer. I was heading home. It has been a long day of work. Quite tiring. Yeah. In what area? In what area of the projects do you live in? Stefan thinks for a moment. He's noticeably. He appears to be noticeably thinking about this. Down that street. Man looks down that street. Looks back at Stefan. Not likely. Somebody dressed like you being in that neck of the woods, you'd wind up dead, shot for a narc or a cop or some shit like that. So don't even try to like bullshit me. Stefan feeling the claws of the beast tearing at the edge of his mind. Can't have this. Honestly, I was heading home from work. You know me. I am your co-worker. I started 2 days ago. We have become friends. And this will be a role for mesmerism. Jesus! Wow, unlucky as me today. Um, Takes a while. Stefan gets a little bit closer, halting maybe 15 feet away. 10, 15 feet away, maybe. Um, it, he kind of looks back at Stefan a little bit closer. Uh, I guess. I look familiar for some reason. I'm a co-worker of yours. I started 2 days ago. Where do I work? Stefan tries to keep his face blank at this point and not looking, not moving his eyes back and forth. It has been tiring today. Then kind of takes a step back, looking at him, taking a more defensive stance and setting the backpack that he has over one shoulder down. Um, Pulling out a knife. Yo, man, you can back the fuck off right now and leave me alone, or I'm gonna cut you in this alley right here and end you. That is not necessary. You should sleep now. As the command comes from Stefan's voice. Man looks at him. Yo, I ain't died. You can back the fuck off right now. Or it's not going to be good for you. Stefan realizing for some reason the command not working. Perhaps it was the stress perhaps it's the stress he's under. Perhaps it's the situation. Perhaps he's been caught in something. Maybe this mortal seen something, noticed something. In earlier statements, he places his hands up. I am, as he takes steps backwards towards a nearby alley. I'm going to leave. I'm sorry for bothering you this evening. Let me go. And as he steps back into the alley, to the other side of a dumpster. He lets us. He quiets his footsteps even more, so as to slip into the shadows. After a little bit, the man follows and looks down the alley. Sees nothing. Satisfied that he chased off this person. He leaves the alley, walking to where he set his backpack down, continues on his way. Stefan comes out from behind the dumpster, thinking the same thoughts, keeping his footsteps quiet, measuring every step while trying to keep up with the man. Like a game of cat and mouse. Reversing roles. He continues to follow him. I'm going to make another dex and stealth roll. This time, his footsteps fall as silent as the dead. Obviously, he still has it in him. Obviously, he has not lost any of his skill in moving, in passing without a trace. He feels focus of his mind become a lot clearer. The claws of the beast seem to back off a little bit, not clawing at the screen. He manages to keep to keep right up there with the man right behind him, and as soon as he gets close enough, Stefan leaps. This is Dex and Brawl without Brawl, so the difficulty is going to be, I believe, 6 plus 1 without Brawl, or because of no Brawl, so it should be 7. Jesus. Um, he. Let's see. So it's 3 for me. That's his. Okay. It's enough. Right up behind the man, silently, quietly hidden. Um, Leaps onto the man's back, immediately sinking his fangs into his neck and beginning to drink. The man topples, falls to the ground. Um, some suffering at least a little injury. Um, on his way down, Stefan continues to feed. He quiets the voracity, cupping his mouth more around the wound to try to keep it clean. I'll actually make a. Wits and survival. Difficulty 7. Tearing into the man's neck. Blood begins to spray a bit here and there. Or not spray, but splatter, as Stefan feeds, and as the sight of blood is spotted, he feels the clawing of the beast at his mind. So it is self-control, difficulty, I think 8 or 9. Oh shit. That is a botch. As the sight of blood, the taste of blood, as the sight of blood comes into his vision, the taste of blood on his tongue, he drains the man ever more fervently, ever more voraciously, feeding. He cannot stop himself. The beast takes over, taking what it needs to sustain itself, draining every ounce of blood that it can from the man's body, not stopping until there isn't a single drop left in the body at all, until Stefan is sucking on a dry, lifeless artery in his neck. Overall, it doesn't take too incredibly long to do it. Once it is done, make another self-control roll. Okay, so that would have been difficulty 7, 2 successes. Once the last drop of blood is taken from the man, Stefan falls back. His eyes close and open. He sees the body, lifeless, backpack on the ground. He sees a bit of blood on his shirt. Blood at the edges of his mouth. He moves to clean. Licking the remnants from his fingers. He grabs the backpack and the man whom he just drained completely dry. Thinking quickly, focusing one into his strength. Focusing one blood into strength so that he can more easily move the man's body into a nearby alleyway, the same one where he had hid from him. It takes him a few minutes. All in all, he actually gets it. He actually gets the body into the alleyway a lot faster than even he expects. He sets the body down behind the dumpster where he had hid previously, and begins to think what to do. He doesn't have any way of getting the body out. He's beginning to panic a little bit. As in his panic, Stefan has a thought occur to him, a memory outside the obsidian shore. He reaches into, he kind of turns the man a little bit to find, checking pants pockets, or checking every pants pocket that he can, even sock, checking the socks, pants pockets, everything, for wallet, keys, cell phone, anything of that nature. And eventually he does find cell phone, keys, and a wallet. He places the keys in the man's sock. Or no, places the man's keys, in his sock. And then thinks, no, leave those in his pants pocket. Takes the man's cell phone and opens the back of it, plucking the battery out, putting that into a shirt pocket really quickly, and then taking the cell phone and placing it inside the man's sock. on his left foot. Goes into the wallet of the man. Finding $40. He takes the money out, placing it into his pocket, placing the man's wallet into the sock on his right foot. And then examines the hoodie that the man was wearing. Remarkably, without bloodstains at all. He sits the man up, pulls the hoodie off, and puts it on himself. It's a little bit big, but not too bad. Stefan thinks, how is he going to do this? He takes a moment to think. Getting up, he takes the battery out of his shirt pocket, drops it into the dumpster underneath several bags, begins to think. He starts pulling out a couple bags from the dumpster, looking around for any sign of anyone. He spots someone coming down the alleyway. Before the person can come around, he quickly sweeps the feet of the dead body to one side, firmly behind the dumpster, placing bags in front of him, make it harder to see, and pulls the hood over his head, make himself just look like a homeless person clawing through trash, looking for whatever he can. We'll actually have him make a manipulation performance, without performance, of course. Make this difficulty 8. Not too convincing. As the two people pass the alleyway, they take a look in. The man crawling inside the dumpster, or looking through the dumpster, and without thinking to make it more convincing, Stefan dives in. And they're like, oh, that's disgusting. Fuck. This is what the city's coming to, fucking homeless people. Ugh. As they continue walking. When they look down the alley, they just continue walking. They don't seem to notice at all the body with the trash bags in front of it. Stefan kind of pokes his head out, now the alleyway a little bit. He listens. Footsteps gets further and further away. He grabs the side of the dumpster quickly and hops out. He grabs up the body of the man and hoists him into the dumpster just for short term, tossing the bags back on top of him. Stefan realizes the smells at this point, and then, without a second thought, ceases the unnecessary breathing in, grabbing up the backpack. He grabbing up the backpack. He begins heading back out of the projects towards downtown again, or towards Chinatown, where you can call a cab. Takes him another 20, 30 minutes of walking. Stefan passes back through the projects unnoticed. After 25 minutes, he arrives, or he finds himself outside of the projects again, back in Chinatown. He dials a number to a local taxi service. He's got unfolding his phone after taking it out of his pocket. And no, good evening. I need a taxi. Chinatown. It's like I'm outside of the Sleeping Dragon. Yeah. 15, 20 minutes. Thank you. All right. I will be waiting. Yeah. You too. Drive safe. Stefan hangs up the phone, folds it, placing it back into his pocket. He waits in the alleyway. Or he waits out front of the Sleeping Dragon. After 15, 20 minutes, the taxi arrives. And he gets in. Cab driver looks back at him. Says, where you going, buddy? I have something to take care of. You sleep now and rest your weary eyes. And as the word rest is spoken, um, the eyes of the taxi driver immediately droop, falls sideways into the front seat. And Stefan um, gets out, keeping the backpack over one shoulder. He gets out of the back door, opens the front side passenger, and begins pulling the driver out and into a nearby alley, or into the nearby alleyway, um, behind a dumpster, out of view from the street. Takes about 10-15 minutes to do so. Luckily, there's no one around at this hour of the evening in this part of town. He takes man's keys and wallet and cell phone. He places them into the man's socks, pulling pant legs down over to cover. Walking back to the cab, he closes the passenger door, or the rear passenger and front passenger doors, gets into the driver's seat. The key still being in the cab. He yeah, the key's still being in the cab, and the cab's still being running. Stefan begins to drive. So we'll be at difficulty of 7. He thinks for a moment, placing his foot onto the brake and looking at the various letters on the dial of the automatic. He thinks, yeah, D, drive. So he places the vehicle into drive and takes a look around for any sign of speed limit, and begins heading back into the projects down the same street that he just walked down, back towards the body. Takes him maybe 5 minutes to get back to where he's going. Make another. Oh wait, no, I don't need to. And he puts on the brakes, not smoothly. The car jerks a bit. Places the car back into park, denoted by a P. He figures. Leaves it running, turns off the car, pulls the keys out. He closes the driver's side door walks to the trunk and opens it. It's going to be a bit of a squeeze, but he should be able to do it. He places the keys to the taxi cab into his left pocket, which is empty, and goes back to the body in the dumpster, pulling the bags out so that he can lift the body. He does. 15 minutes later, he's got the body out and into the trunk of the cab, closing the lid. He goes back into the dumpster, just quickly throws 2-3 garbage bags back in there. And gets back into the car, turning it on, placing his foot on the brake. And he pulls out he turns the vehicle to turn back around in a U formation. Relatively smooth, but a bit jerky here and there. Obviously making a 2 to 3 point turn in the process. But eventually he gets the vehicle turned around and thinks about where to head. He begins driving south through downtown. Heading towards the historic district and towards the docks. Within let's see, 30 minutes of driving. I'll have to make another driving roll. Not the smoothest. Couple times the car jerks, stop and go. But luckily, the couple of the 2 police cars he passes one after another, just smile and nod, waving at him, letting him go on his way unmolested. He counts himself very fortunate at this point. He eventually arrives in the southern docks area, heading towards warehouse E3 junction 12, taking the back way around. When he gets there, he pulls the cab around towards the back of the warehouse, where there's a door to an office. Stefan gets out of the car, walks into the door, looking around. No light in here. He quickly walks back outside, looks through the backpack just to see if there's something. No veil, no flashlight. And then he spots something in the cab, what looks like a small flashlight there. He grabs it, walks back in towards the building, or back in the building, and he starts looking around for that plastic tote that was here before. After a few minutes, he does spot a familiar plastic tote. He runs over to it, pulling the lid off, sitting nearby. After a little bit, he goes back to the door, turns the light off just beforehand, and towards the trunk of the cab. Let's see. I have him make a wits roll. When he gets to the cab, he spots a lever. The just under the wheel of the car. Looks like it has a person. It looks like the back of a car and something opening. He pulls it and the trunk opens. He goes to the back of the vehicle, moves to pull the body out, realizing when he does that the power of the blood is worn. He refocuses the VTMYTE towards its task so as to make this a little bit easier. And begins dragging the body into the warehouse. It takes him a good 20 minutes to do so. As he carries the body, one arm over his shoulder and the other arm around the dead man's torso. The flashlight on, kind of precariously held as he lifts the body in. He begins to place this corpse into the tote, trying to figure out the best way to do so. Realizing that the man is going to be a little too big. Stefan tries to think quickly, how is he going to do this? I'm going to have him make wits and medicine roll. Difficulty 7. pulls the man up out a little bit, and then when he places the man back down in to the tote, his legs are out this time. Once the torso of the man is in, Stefan grabs first the leg, or one of his legs, and forces it back into an unnatural position. At first, nothing. There's a sickening crunch and rip. He tries again, the same amount of force a few minutes later, and with an even more sickening crunch and rip, the man's leg goes even more limp and slack as the sound of breaking bones is heard. So great that not only does clothing rip, but Stefan feels that leg even looser, as though he had ripped it maybe partially out of a socket. He grabs the other leg once the first one's in, and it goes in a little bit easier, but again, he, with the same amount of force, kind of pulls it backwards into an unnatural position, and that same sickening crunch and crackle of bone, that ripping of flesh, occurs as he folds the man's legs on top of his torso. He, one by one arm then the other, does the same thing. There's the sickening, crunching, crackling, and breaking sound isn't quite as prominent as he places the man's arm in the tote, but is still present. And he sees a ripping of flesh as he again places the man's arms into the tote. And lastly, to place the man's head further in the tote. He grabs the head, and in order to make it more pliable, places his one hand behind the man's head, the other in the man's jaw, and gives it a twist. And with a solid, singular movement, he snaps the lifeless man's neck, feeling it go slack in his hand, hearing several loud crunching sounds from the vertebrae in that area of the body. Snap, snap, snap. The man's neck goes slack, and he's able to more easily place his head into the tote, and then pulling the lid over the top, moves to pull the handles to snap the lid closed on each side. Another 5-10 minutes is what this takes to accomplish, but eventually it's in there. The tote bulging a bit, but not too bad. Stefan remembers something. He turns on the flashlight, or he picks up the flashlight still on, looks into the other room, and he sees a hole in the wall. He begins pulling the tote. Little after little, or a little bit after little bit, closer into the room, towards the hole in the wall, trying to get it positioned, but to no success. The tote is just too broad. He pulls the tote further into the room, placing it behind a desk and putting another desk to block view. The office is, things are strewn about here and there. Neither of the desks are sitting where they would have originally anyway. He thinks, who would notice if they're moved? He picks up the flashlight again, begins heading out the building, turning the flashlight off, and making his way to the back of the car to close the trunk. He quickly moves back towards the the driver's side of the cab, gets in, placing the flashlight into the glove compartment, and begins backing out. Not cleanly, however. When Stefan puts the car into reverse, he scrapes the passenger side of the cab against one of the warehouse buildings. He can hear some sounds coming from somewhere around the warehouse. He places the car back into drive and tries again, pulling forward from behind E3 Junction 12. Towards the front and towards an exit out of the warehouse district. In the panic, he puts his foot on the pedal a little bit heavier than he has. Again, a passing police car on patrol looks at him. Stefan releases his foot from the gas and places it on the brake a little bit to slow down. Police officer looks at him. And continues on his way. Stefan continues back towards continues his way north, back through the warehouse district, back towards the historic district. Trying to keep to ride at the speed limit. And having at least a little degree of luck, one success on that last roll, he eventually gets to the bridge between the warehouse district and historic district, continues north, moving past the church and right, heading further north into downtown. Another 15-20 minutes later, he arrives back in Chinatown. Um, Back to the side of the Sleeping Dragon, some restaurant there, I guess, or Stefan guesses. Um, he gets out of the car, turning it off. He locks both of the back doors and the side driver door, only leaving the passenger door open at the moment. Walks back to the alleyway where the sleeping cab driver was and begins pulling him back towards the car, placing him inside. It takes a little bit of doing. Eventually, Stefan gets the man sitting back on the driver's side of the car, leaning against the window. Taking the $40 from the dead man's wallet, placing it on the dashboard of the cab, moving back outside the cab, locking the door. The cab driver not rousing even once. It's a deep slumber that he's in. Stefan locks the door to the cab, closes it. The cab driver looks like he's going to rouse at the sound of the door closing, but just kind of stretches, eyes still closed, resituates his hand on the side of his face as he sits in the cab sleeping. And Stefan makes his way back towards the alleyway in the Chinatown alleyway. He attempts to measure his footsteps a little bit, slink into the shadows. He believes he has, but despite that, he heads back towards downtown and his apartment to get cleaned up, realizing that he's got 30 minutes before his work shift. When he gets back to his downtown apartment above that little diner, he goes to unlock it and realizes the door wasn't locked. He walks in carefully, the backpack from the dead man still slung over his shoulder, turns on the light, the nearest switch to the side of the door, takes a look throughout his apartment, his studio, realizing nothing is missing. He closes and locks the door. Placing the backpack down under a workbench into something akin to a milk crate, peeling off peeling off clothing, at least his shirt and pants. At this point, grabbing a new shirt and a new pair of pants, cleaning off his shoes, whatever's on them. He begins to ready himself for work, placing the articles of clothing into the short tub basin of his shower area as the scene comes to an uneasy close.